I told my son that my savings were gone at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. By 5 that afternoon, his wife had changed the locks on the house I had paid for. She did not ask where the money had gone. She did not ask whether I was sick, whether I had been scammed, or whether I needed help. She heard the word "gone," looked at my son, and made a decision. In her mind, I had stopped being useful. What she did not know was that my savings had not disappeared. I had moved them somewhere neither she nor my son could touch. Because after 3 years of paying their bills, raising their children, and pretending not to notice the way they spoke about my money, I needed to learn the truth. I wanted to know whether I was part of their family, or simply the account that kept their family comfortable. I received my answer before sunset. My name is Margaret Lawson. I was 66 years old when this happened. Although my daughter-in-law, Vanessa, often spoke to me as if I were much older, she used a soft voice whenever she wanted to correct me, the kind people use with confused patients or stubborn children. "Margaret, you probably forgot," she would say, even when I had not forgotten anything. Or, "At your age, you shouldn't worry about finances." Although I had managed a medical office for 38 years, paid off 2 mortgages, and handled every financial decision after my husband died. Vanessa was 34, energetics, polished, and always certain that confidence was the same thing as competence. My son, Daniel, had married her 6 years earlier. At first, I believed she was exactly what he needed. Daniel had always been kind but indecisive. Vanessa had ambition, direction, and the ability to make plans quickly. What I did not understand was that she also believed every person in her life should serve one of those plans. Daniel was my only child. His father, Thomas, died when Daniel was 27. Thomas had been a patient man, a high school history teacher who repaired old furniture on weekends and believed money should create security, not status. We were never wealthy, but we lived carefully. We bought a modest house, avoided unnecessary debt, and saved something from every paycheck. When Thomas became ill, we used part of those savings for treatment. But he had excellent insurance and a small life insurance policy. After his death, I continued working for several years and invested cautiously. By the time I retired, I owned my home outright, had a healthy retirement account, and held a small rental property that generated steady income. Daniel knew I was financially comfortable, but I never told him the exact amount. That was not because I distrusted him. At least, not then. Thomas and I had simply believed that adult children should build their own lives without calculating what they might inherit. We helped Daniel with college, contributed to his wedding, and gave him a reasonable down payment for his first home. Beyond that, we expected him to work, save, and make responsible decisions. For the first few years of Daniel and Vanessa's marriage, they seemed to do well. Daniel worked in commercial insurance. Vanessa managed events for a hotel. They purchased a townhouse and had 2 children, Lily and Noah. I adored my grandchildren. After I retired, I watched them twice a week, sometimes more. I picked them up from school, prepared dinner, attended doctor appointments when their parents could not leave work, and kept clothes and toys at my house. Then Vanessa lost her job during a hotel restructuring. Daniel's income was enough to cover basic expenses, but not the lifestyle they had built around 2 salaries. They had a large car payment, credit card debt, expensive childcare, and a mortgage that had become difficult after their interest rate changed. Daniel called me one evening and asked for a temporary loan. "We just need 6 months," he said, "until Vanessa finds something." I transferred $12,000 the next morning. Vanessa thanked me warmly. She brought flowers, hugged me, and said she would never forget what I had done. 6 months passed. She did not find another full-time job. She said the available positions were beneath her experience. Daniel asked for additional help. I paid their property taxes and covered several months of preschool tuition. Temporary support slowly became part of the family budget. Whenever I hesitated, Daniel mentioned the children. Lily might have to leave her school. Noah needed dental work. The electricity bill was overdue. They were trying. He insisted. But everything cost more than expected. I told myself that I was fortunate to help. What was the point of having savings if I could not protect my family? The first serious warning appeared when they sold the townhouse. Daniel said they wanted to move closer to me so the children could attend better schools. Vanessa found a 5-bedroom house less than 10 minutes from mine. It had a renovated kitchen, a large yard, and a price they could not possibly afford. When I pointed that out, Vanessa smiled. "We're thinking long-term," she said. "The children need space. And you won't want to live alone forever." I asked what she meant. She explained that the house had a first-floor guest suite. One day, when I was older, I could move in with them. That way, I would not need assisted living, and they would not need to worry about me. The idea sounded loving when she said it. Daniel seemed genuinely enthusiastic. He described Sunday dinners, holidays, and the grandchildren visiting my room before school. I allowed myself to imagine it. They needed another down payment. I contributed $180,000. The deed and mortgage remained in Daniel and Vanessa's names. My attorney, Helen Moore, strongly advised me to create a written loan agreement or retain a percentage of ownership. I refused. I said Daniel was my son. Helen looked at me for a long moment and asked whether Vanessa viewed the money as a gift. "I suppose it is a gift," I said. "Then understand what that means." She replied, "Once it is transferred, you will have no legal control over the property." I understood the words, but not the future they predicted. Daniel and Vanessa moved into the house. For the first year, everything seemed fine. They gave me a key and encouraged me to visit. I watched the children 3 afternoons a week and often stayed for dinner. Vanessa began working as an independent event consultant. Although her income remained inconsistent, Daniel received a promotion. But somehow, their financial emergencies continued. They needed money to renovate the guest suite that was supposedly meant for me. They needed help replacing the heating system. They needed a larger vehicle because Vanessa's mother, Patricia, often traveled with them. They needed funds for Lily's private reading specialist and Noah's summer program. I paid because every request contained a reasonable explanation. Then the guest suite changed. Vanessa's mother began staying there during visits. First, it was one weekend. Then it became several weeks. Patricia lived in another state and had recently separated from her third husband. Vanessa said her mother needed emotional support. I tried to be understanding, but Patricia treated the room as her own. She replaced the bedding, filled the closet, and hung framed photographs on the walls. One afternoon, I jokingly said, "At this rate, there won't be room for me when I get old." Vanessa did not laugh. "We'll figure something out," she said. That phrase stayed with me. Around the same time, Vanessa's attitude toward my visits began to change. She asked me to text before coming over, even though I usually arrived at scheduled times to watch the children. If I entered through the side door with my key, She looked irritated. She said it was important for the children to understand privacy. Eventually, she asked me to use the front door and wait to be let in. I reminded her that she had given me a key. That was for emergencies, she said. It had not been for emergencies. I remembered Daniel placing the key in my hand and saying, "This is your home too." I gave the key back. Daniel noticed the tension, but he avoided addressing it. That was his pattern. He wanted everyone to be happy, which usually meant asking the least confrontational person to accept more discomfort. "Vanessa has been under pressure," he told me. "She feels like you judge her. I have paid nearly every major bill she has brought to me. That might be part of the problem." I stared at him. My help makes her feel judged? She feels dependent. Then she should stop asking for money. Daniel Saihu. Mom, please don't make everything so black and white. Over the next 2 years, I watched my role shrink and expand at the same time. I became less welcome in their home, but more important to their finances. Vanessa did not want me dropping by. Yet she expected me to babysit whenever she had a client meeting. She complained that I bought the children too many practical gifts, then sent me links to expensive birthday presents. She criticized the meals I prepared, but asked me to stock their freezer. The situation became impossible to ignore after Noah's 7th birthday. Vanessa organized a large party in the backyard. There was a rented inflatable slide, a magician, professional decorations, and catering for nearly 50 guests. I arrived early because Vanessa had asked me to bring 2 trays of food and help supervise the children. Patricia was already there, sitting at the kitchen island with a glass of wine. When guests began arriving, Vanessa introduced Patricia as the children's grandmother. She introduced me as Daniel's mom. The distinction was subtle, but deliberate. Later, I overheard 2 of Vanessa's friends talking near the patio. One woman asked, "Is that the mother-in-law who helped them buy the house?" The other replied, "Yes. Vanessa says she'll probably leave them everything anyway." I did not hear what came next because Lily ran over and grabbed my hand. That evening, after the guests left, I asked Vanessa whether she had discussed my finances with her friends. She rolled her eyes. "I may have mentioned that you helped with the house. That is not what I heard." "What did you hear? That you expect me to leave you everything?" Daniel entered the kitchen at that moment and immediately looked uncomfortable. Vanessa crossed her arms. "You only have 1 child. That does not mean you are entitled to anything." "I didn't say we were entitled. You told your friends." She was making conversation. I turned to Daniel. "Have the 2 of you discussed my estate?" He looked at the floor. The answer was yes. Vanessa became defensive. Every married couple discusses the future. "My death is not your financial plan." "No one said that. You are living in a house I helped purchase, driving a car I helped finance, and discussing what happens to my money when I die." Daniel finally spoke. "Mom, calm down." Those words ended the conversation for me. Not because I was shouting. I was not. They ended it because my son had chosen to manage my reaction rather than address his wife's behavior. I left. The next morning, I called Helen, my attorney. I told her everything. She did not say, "I warned you." She simply asked me to bring copies of my accounts, insurance policies, property records, and will. Over the following weeks, we reorganized my finances. I moved a significant portion of my liquid savings into a revocable trust. I changed the beneficiaries on several accounts. I created a separate education trust for Lily and Noah that Daniel and Vanessa could not access directly. I updated my will so that the grandchildren's inheritance would be protected by an independent trustee. Daniel would still receive something, but far less than he expected. Most importantly, I sold my rental property. The property had appreciated significantly, and I had been planning to sell it eventually. The sale gave me enough money to purchase a smaller home in a retirement community near the coast, where several friends already lived. I did not move immediately. I rented the new property to a retired couple for 1 year while I prepared my current house for sale. Daniel and Vanessa knew nothing about these plans. I was not trying to trap them. At least, that was what I told myself. But I needed to know whether our relationship would survive if they believed there was no inheritance waiting for them. The opportunity came 3 months later. Daniel invited me to lunch. He seemed unusually nervous. After we ordered, he explained that he and Vanessa wanted to refinance the house. Their credit card debt had grown, and several of Vanessa's business expenses had not produced income. The bank required additional documentation and a stronger financial position. Then he asked whether I would co-sign. No, I said. He blinked. You didn't even think about it. I have already contributed enough to that house. We're not asking for money. You are asking me to become responsible for your debt. It's only paperwork. Then you should have no problem signing without me. His expression changed. Vanessa said you might react like this. I almost smiled. How did she expect me to react? She thinks you're becoming overly protective of your money. I am becoming appropriately protective of my money. Daniel lowered his voice. Mom, is something wrong? You've been different. I looked at my son and made the decision. Yes, I said. Something is wrong. He leaned forward. I no longer have the savings you think I have. For several seconds, he did not speak. What do you mean? I mean the money is gone. His face became pale. All of it? The accounts have been emptied. That was technically true. The accounts he knew about had been emptied and transferred into the trust. I did not say I had lost the money. I allowed him to make that assumption. How? He asked. I made several decisions. What kind of decisions? I'm not ready to discuss the details. He stared at me, as if I had announced a serious illness. For one moment, I felt guilty. Then his first real question arrived. What are you going to live on? My pension and Social Security will cover basic expenses. And the house? I may sell it. Daniel leaned back. His eyes moved rapidly. Calculating. Does Vanessa know? No. He reached for his phone. Please don't call her yet. I said, I wanted to tell you first. He nodded. But his mind was already somewhere else. We ended lunch early. Daniel hugged me in the parking lot and said we would figure everything out. I drove home, feeling unsettled, but also hopeful. Maybe I had been unfair. Maybe he would speak with Vanessa and return with concern rather than panic. At 12:30, Vanessa called. I let it ring twice before answering. What happened to your money? She asked. No greeting. No question about my health. I told Daniel that my savings were gone. How can savings just be gone? They can be spent, transferred, lost, or used. Which one? That is private. Her voice sharpened. It stopped being private when your decisions affected our family. I looked around my quiet kitchen. How have my finances affected your family? We made plans based on certain expectations. There it was. What expectations? She paused, realizing she had said too much. We expected you to be secure. I am secure. You just said you have no savings. I have enough monthly income to support myself. What happens if you need long-term care? That is my responsibility. No. Margaret. It becomes Daniel's responsibility, which means it becomes mine. I heard anger beneath her concern. She was not afraid that I would suffer. She was afraid I would cost her money. I won't ask to live with you, I said. Another pause. Then she replied, that is probably for the best. The cruelty of the sentence was quiet. She did not say it with satisfaction. She said it like someone finalizing a practical arrangement. I asked about the guest suite. What about it? You and Daniel said it was built so I could live with you one day. Circumstances change. Because my savings are gone? Because we have to think about the children. I almost admired how quickly she converted greed into parental responsibility. What are you asking me? Vanessa, I'm not asking anything. I just think we need clear boundaries going forward. I ended the call before she could define them. At 2:15, Daniel texted. He said Vanessa was upset and needed time. At 3, she sent a message asking me not to come to the house without contacting them first. I reminded her that I no longer had a key. She did not respond. At 4:30, Lily called from her tablet. She asked whether I was still picking her up from school the next day. Before I could answer, Vanessa's voice appeared in the background. Lily. End the call. The screen went dark. At 5:20, my doorbell rang. A delivery driver stood on the porch holding a small cardboard box. Inside were several items I had kept at Daniel's house: a sweater, gardening gloves, medication, 2 framed photographs, and the children's spare car seats. On top was an envelope containing a letter from Vanessa. It said that because of my recent instability, she and Daniel believed it was best to create distance. I would no longer be responsible for school pickups or unsupervised childcare. They also wanted all access codes, spare keys, and garage remotes returned immediately. At the bottom, she had written, "We have changed the locks for everyone's peace of mind." Before sunset, that was how long it took her to erase me from a house purchased partly with my money. I called Daniel. He did not answer. I called again. He sent a message saying he could not talk because the children were present. I wrote, "Did you agree to this?" He replied 15 minutes later, "Vanessa thinks it is temporary. Please do not make things worse." I stared at those words until the screen blurred. He had agreed. That evening, I did not cry. I placed the box in the guest room, made tea, and opened a notebook. I wrote down every major payment I had made for Daniel and Vanessa over the previous 6 years. The house deposit, property taxes, school tuition, car repairs, medical bills, renovation costs, emergency transfers. When I finished, the total exceeded $340,000. I had not purchased love with that money. I knew that, but I had believed I was supporting a family in which my place was secure. Vanessa's letter showed me the truth. My place had always depended on usefulness. The next morning, I forwarded the letter to Helen. She called immediately. "Do not respond emotionally." I wasn't planning to. "What are you planning?" "To finish what we started." Within 1 week, my house was listed for sale. Because the market was strong, I received 3 offers almost immediately. I accepted one from a young family who agreed to a flexible closing date. I also notified Daniel that I was no longer available for financial support. He called within minutes. "You're selling the house?" "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me? You changed the locks on your house without telling me." That was Vanessa's decision. "You allowed it." He sighed. "Mom?" She panicked. "She thought you might show up and demand to live with us." "Did I? No." "Have I ever?" "No." "But after you lost your money, I did not ask for anything." He became quiet. I continued. "You heard that my savings were gone. And within hours, you removed me from your children's lives." "That is not what happened." Then explain what happened. He said Vanessa was worried about instability. He said I had become secretive. He said parents had to protect their children from unpredictable situations. What unpredictable situation? I asked. A retired grandmother receiving a pension? You won't tell us where the money went. You are not entitled to know. I'm your son. And I am your mother? But that did not stop you from putting my belongings in a box. His voice softened. We can fix this. Return the car seats and let me see the children. I have to discuss that with Vanessa. That answer told me nothing had changed. No. I said. You don't. What do you mean? I mean you are their father. If you need your wife's permission to allow your children to see the woman who has cared for them since birth, then your marriage has a problem I cannot solve. I disconnected the call. 2 weeks later, the first financial consequence arrived. Daniel's property tax payment was due. For the previous 3 years, I had paid it directly. This time, I did nothing. He called and asked whether I had forgotten. No. We were counting on that money. You should not count on money that belongs to someone else. He became angry. You can't just stop without warning. Vanessa gave me less than 5 hours of warning before changing the locks. That has nothing to do with the taxes. It has everything to do with them. He accused me of punishing the children. I reminded him that he and Vanessa lived in a 5-bedroom home, owned 2 expensive vehicles, and continued paying for private activities. They could sell something, reduce expenses, or increase their income. Vanessa called later that evening. Her voice was controlled but furious. You are using money to manipulate Daniel. I am no longer giving you money. That is manipulation. No. Manipulation was treating me like family while expecting an inheritance. Then, removing me when you thought the inheritance was gone. She denied doing that. I read part of her letter aloud. She said it had been written during an emotional moment. Changing the locks required a locksmith. I replied, that was not a moment. That was an appointment. For the first time. She had no immediate response. The consequences continued. Their refinancing application failed without my signature. Vanessa's car lease came due, and they could not afford the replacement she wanted. The children's private summer program required payment. Daniel asked whether I would cover it directly so Vanessa could not access the money. No. It's for Lily and Noah. I created a protected education fund for them. He became silent. You did what? The money will be available for approved educational expenses when they are older. Neither you nor Vanessa can withdraw it. Why didn't you tell us? Because it belongs to them. What else have you done? I did not answer. That was when suspicion replaced panic. Daniel began asking whether the savings were truly gone. Vanessa apparently told him I was hiding something. They drove to my house one Saturday afternoon. But the sale sign was already in the yard. Vanessa stared at it. Where are you going? I haven't decided what to tell you. You cannot disappear from the children's lives. I almost laughed at the reversal. You removed me from their lives. That was temporary. You changed the locks. Because you were acting unstable. I said my savings were gone. You refused to explain. My money is not evidence of mental stability. Daniel stepped between us. Can everyone calm down? I looked at him. No. You do not get to reduce this to a disagreement between 2 emotional women. Your wife changed the locks. But you let her. Your wife returned my belongings. But you stayed silent. Your wife stopped the children from calling me. And you defended her. His face tightened. She is my wife. And I am your mother. Those relationships should not require you to erase one person to satisfy the other. Vanessa folded her arms. Where did the money go? Margaret? I looked directly at her. Why does it matter? Because we need to know whether you are safe. Would knowing I still had money make me safer? She did not answer. I nodded. That is what I thought. I asked them to leave. 3 weeks later, I moved into a furnished rental while the sale closed. I did not tell Daniel the address. I saw Lily and Noah only once during that period. At a school performance, Vanessa could not prevent me from attending a public event, but she seated herself between the children and me. Afterward, Lily ran over and hugged me before Vanessa could stop her. "Why don't you pick us up anymore?" she asked. I looked at Daniel. He looked away. I knelt beside her. "The adults are working through some things. None of it is your fault. Mom said you are moving because you spent all your money." Vanessa's face turned red. I stood slowly. "Did she?" Daniel whispered. "Not here." Again. His greatest concern was the location of the truth. I left before anger made me careless. The sale of my house closed the following month. After taxes and fees, the proceeds were transferred directly into the trust. Then I notified my tenant that I would not renew the lease on the coastal property when it ended. I planned to move there permanently in the spring. Helen suggested one final step. She wanted me to meet Daniel alone and explain enough of the truth to prevent him from claiming later that I had misled him unfairly. We met in her office. Daniel arrived looking exhausted. He glanced at the conference table, the folders, and Helen, then sat across from me. "Am I being sued?" he asked. "No." "Then why are we here?" "I want to clarify my financial situation." His shoulders stiffened. I placed Vanessa's letter on the table. "When I told you my savings were gone, I meant they were no longer in the accounts you knew about." He stared at me. "The money was transferred into a trust. My rental property was sold. My former home has also been sold. I am financially secure." His face moved through confusion, relief, and then anger. "You lied to me." I said the accounts had been emptied. They had. "You made us believe you were broke. I allowed you to believe I no longer had savings." "Why?" "Because I needed to know what would happen if you thought there was nothing to inherit." He stood so quickly that the chair moved backward. "You tested us?" I protected myself. "You set Vanessa up." "No." I did not ask her to change the locks. I did not ask her to return my belongings, stop the children from calling, or describe me as unstable. She was scared. Of supporting me? Yes. I supported both of you for years. Daniel looked at Helen, perhaps hoping she would disapprove. She remained silent. He sat again. "So this was all some kind of game?" "No. The trust is real. The new will is real. The end of financial support is real." His face became pale. "What new will?" I explained that Lily and Noah had protected educational funds. A portion of my estate would go to them through an independent trustee. I had also designated several charities and made provisions for my own long-term care. "And me?" he asked quietly. "You are included." "How much?" "That is private." He stared at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was not grief. It was calculation struggling against shame. "Vanessa will say you are trying to break up our marriage." "I am trying to stay out of your marriage." "She'll think you hate her?" "I do not hate Vanessa. I believe her actions revealed how she values me." "And what do you think about me?" That question was harder. "I think you love me," I said. "But I also think you were willing to sacrifice my dignity to avoid conflict with your wife. Love without courage is not enough to build trust." He lowered his eyes. I told him the financial support was over. I would give gifts to the children at appropriate times, but I would not pay household expenses, refinance debts, purchase vehicles, or rescue them from overspending. I also said I wanted a relationship with Lily and Noah that did not depend on money. Daniel asked whether I would forgive him. Forgiveness is possible. I said. Access is earned. He began crying. It was the first time I had seen my adult son cry since his father's funeral. I didn't know what to do. He whispered, "You could have told your wife no. She said if you had lost everything, you would become our responsibility. She was afraid we would lose the house. The house I helped you buy. I know. You changed the locks anyway." He covered his face with both hands. For several minutes, no one spoke. Daniel eventually apologized. Not for misunderstanding my words, but for allowing fear and greed to determine how he treated me. I listened. I did not tell him everything was fine. It was not. Vanessa's response was very different. She sent a long email accusing me of emotional manipulation, financial abuse, and deliberately threatening her children's security. She said any loving mother would have discussed the trust with her son. She insisted she had changed the locks only because she believed I was planning to force my way into their home. I responded with 4 sentences. I never asked to live with you. I never threatened your home. I will not discuss my private finances. Future communication should concern the children only. She did not answer. For nearly 4 months, I saw my grandchildren only when Daniel brought them without Vanessa. At first, the visits were awkward. Lily asked why I lived in a rental. Noah wanted to know whether I was poor. I answered simply, I have enough. More importantly, I have a plan. When spring arrived, I moved to the coast. My new home was smaller than the house where Daniel had grown up, but it faced a quiet garden and stood within walking distance of the water. I joined a book club, began volunteering at a community clinic, and learned that retirement could be more than waiting for my family to need me. Daniel visited with the children twice that summer. Vanessa did not come. Their financial problems forced changes they should have made years earlier. They sold one vehicle, moved the children from private programs, and created a budget. Vanessa accepted a full-time position at a conference center. Daniel stopped asking me for money. The house remained theirs, but for the first time, they had to carry its true cost. Nearly a year after the locks were changed, Vanessa came to see me. She arrived alone and stood on my porch with the same controlled posture she used whenever she expected a negotiation. I invited her inside. For several minutes, she commented on the house and the view. Then she apologized. At first, it was the kind of apology that focused on pressure and misunderstanding. She said she had been frightened. She said my announcement had triggered memories of supporting her own mother after the divorce. She said she reacted too quickly. I listened until she stopped. "Why did you prevent the children from speaking to me?" I asked. She looked down. "I thought distance would make you explain the money. So the children were leverage." Her face tightened. "I would not use that word." "What word would you use?" She had no answer. I continued. "You believed that if I lost my money, I would become a burden. You wanted to remove me before I could ask for help." She nodded slightly. "Then you discovered the money still existed. And now you want to repair the relationship. That's not fair?" "It is exactly what happened." She began to argue, then stopped. For the first time since I had known her, she seemed tired rather than polished. "I grew up with a mother who spent everything," she said. "Every crisis became my responsibility. When Daniel said your money was gone, I imagined you moving in, needing care, and taking over our lives." I panicked. Her explanation did not excuse her actions, but it made them more human. "You could have asked me what I needed." I said. "I know. You could have remembered what I had already given." "I know. You could have treated me like a person instead of a financial risk." She began crying. I did not comfort her immediately. Some discomfort belongs to the person who created it. Eventually, I told her that we could rebuild a relationship slowly. She would not have access to my finances. The grandchildren would not be used as leverage again. If she or Daniel needed money, the answer would be no, unless I independently chose otherwise. Most importantly, my place in the family could not depend on what I owned. She agreed. Trust did not return that afternoon. Trust returned in small pieces over the next 2 years. Vanessa began inviting me to events without attaching requests. Daniel called to ask how I was rather than what I could pay. They brought the children to visit and respected my home. When financial problems appeared, they handled them. I never restored the old will. Some people might consider that unforgiving. I do not. My estate plan protects the grandchildren, supports causes Thomas and I cared about, and ensures that no one benefits from pressuring me. Daniel will receive enough to know he was loved, but not enough to treat my death as a financial strategy. The locks Vanessa changed were eventually replaced again when she and Daniel sold the large house and moved into something they could afford. Before the sale, Daniel found the original guest suite plans in a drawer. He brought them to me one afternoon. "We really did mean it when we said you could live with us," he said. "I believe you meant it at the time." He looked ashamed. "Then we changed the moment we thought it might actually happen." "Yes. I'm sorry." This apology was different because it did not demand immediate relief. It simply acknowledged the truth. I hugged him. I still think about that Tuesday. At 10 in the morning, I told my son my savings were gone. Before sunset, his wife changed the locks. For a long time, I viewed that day as the moment my family betrayed me. Now, I see it as the moment a hidden arrangement became visible. They had mistaken my generosity for obligation. I had mistaken their dependence for closeness. We had all participated in a system where money replaced difficult conversations. When I removed the money, the system collapsed. It was painful, but it was necessary. I did not lose my son. I lost the version of our relationship in which I had to pay to feel secure. Daniel did not lose an inheritance. He lost the belief that my future belonged to him. Vanessa did not lose control of her home. She lost the right to treat me as a threat whenever I stopped being useful. And I gained something I should have protected much earlier. I gained the freedom to be loved without proving my value through sacrifice. My savings were never gone, but the woman who believed she had to finance her place in the family was. She disappeared before sunset. The moment I saw that box on my porch and understood exactly what the locks were meant to keep out. They were meant to keep out a burden. Instead, they released a woman who finally remembered that she had a home of her own, a future of her own, and a life that did not need anyone else's permission to continue.